Welcome to the Department of Conservation and Recreation's public information session on the trail system at Manuel Correllus State Forest. My name is Priscilla Geiges. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Conservation and Resource Stewardship, and I want to thank you for joining us this evening. So tonight we're going to give you an update on the trail system within the state forest. Last spring, it came to DCR's attention that several miles of unauthorized trails had been created within the state forest. And for the past several months, our DCR staff have conducted a review of the situation and a review of our existing official trail system. So in tonight's public information session, we're going to give you an update on how DCR is going to address the trail system going forward. We're going to walk you through the results of the internal analysis we did on the existing trail system and the changes that we're going to make going forward to balance recreational opportunities with ecological protection and to comply with regulatory standards and DCR's internal review and approval processes. And I'm joined tonight by several DCR colleagues, and I'm going to just introduce a few of them. Eric Seaborn, our Director of Natural Resources, and Ali Achandi, our inland ecologist, are going to be making the presentation tonight. And Jenny Norwood, our Director of Partnerships, and Dan Cushing, our Director of Public Engagement, are going to be monitoring all of the questions and helping with the logistics here. I also wanted to mention our colleague at Mass Wildlife within the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, our Chief of Regulatory Compliance, Jesse Ledick. He's joining us as well. So we definitely appreciate the time that you're taking to join us for about the next 90 minutes. So we'll go to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit about the logistics for the meeting. So we'd like to walk you through the entire presentation before taking any questions. You can certainly submit your questions through the chat, and Dan and Jenny are going to be monitoring those. You can also raise your hand and they'll unmute you and they'll introduce you. So everybody has been muted for this presentation. I also wanted to mention that the presentation is being recorded this evening, and that recording, it will be a public record. I also want to mention that we are joined by representatives of the legislative delegation. And so at the beginning of our question and answer period, we're going to give them an opportunity to say a few words. Next slide, please. So I also want to welcome you tonight on behalf of Governor Charlie Baker, Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito, and our Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Kathleen Theoharides, and our Commissioner of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, Jim Montgomery. In the next slide, we talk about our mission statement. And before any presentation, we like to review our mission statement. And here it is: to protect, promote, and enhance our commonwealth, meaning they belong to all of us, of our natural, cultural, and recreational resources for the well-being of all. So it's really creating that balance among all of those resources for everyone's well-being. And the next slide goes through the agenda. And as I mentioned, Eric Seaborn, our Director of Natural Resources, and Ali Achandi, our inland ecologist, are going to walk you through our review and the plan moving forward. And here's what they're going to cover. First, they'll give you an overview of the forest, its ecological significance, and its diversity of recreational opportunities. Then they're going to go through the review and approval process for any project and the specific considerations that DCR has when we site new trails. Next, they'll outline the assessment that we conducted and the plan going forward. So what it looks like and how we're going to implement it. And then we'll conclude with shared stewardship and how you can help implement the plan and provide ongoing stewardship of this very important forest. So I'd like to turn it over to Eric Seaborn for the next slide.
Thank you, Priscilla. And good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for your time for this important topic. We appreciate it very much. The Department of Conservation and Recreation manages more than 450,000 acres across the state. And those acres contain incredible resources and some spectacular locations that we are blessed to have in the state of Massachusetts. But even within that network, Manuel Correllus stands out as being a very, very special place. And on this list, you'll see some of the reasons why that is true. It is one of the top 3 most ecologically diverse properties in the entire state. It is one of our most significant properties for rare species and the habitats that support them, and for the conservation work that's required to maintain those habitats and species. It is the largest tract of undeveloped land on Martha's Vineyard, as I'm sure all of you know, and I'm certain a lot of you are living on the island. It is a key part of the conservation network for Martha's Vineyard. And as we'll show, and sure you are aware of, it is a there are a lot of diverse opportunities for recreation and other amenities that are part of the park that are very important. And it is part of the rich history of the state, including, and we want to recognize that we are the present day stewards of this land, following on the thousands of years of the native peoples who lived on the island and managed this ecosystem. And so we are the inheritors of that effort, and we want to bring it forward and turn it over to future generations in even better condition than we find it, hopefully. Next slide, please, Allie. If we drill down into the ecological resources of the island, this is where, as Director of Natural Resources in our program, we focus on these resources very intensively. It is a very unique location. It's 5,173 acres, and it's almost entirely designated as a reserve. And for those of you who are not familiar with a reserve designation, several years ago, DCR went through the process of designating our properties as either as reserves, woodlands, or parklands. And there are various uses that are appropriate for those designations. And for a reserve, these areas are where the dominant ecosystem, the dominant objective is to maintain biological diversity, maintain nutrient cycling and other processes of nature, and long-term carbon sequestration. But in addition, these reserves are areas that users often value for spiritual reasons and that may provide elements of a wilderness recreational experience. So Manuel Correllus is part of our reserve network. So more than 90% of the forest is protected as habitat for rare and endangered species. And here you see that we have quite a variety of species, including 38 species that are state listed under the Mass Endangered Species Act. And that includes plants, moths, butterflies, birds. And we have 1 federally listed endangered species. But we also have the habitats and that support those species. So 5 are ranked as fragile ecosystems at risk of being extirpated from the state. So on the bottom of the images are beautiful. You see the buck moth on the left and the whippoorwill, eastern whippoorwill in the middle, and a view looking out onto one of the frost pockets, which is a very unique ecosystem that is found in Manuel Correllus. Next slide, please, Ellie. Now, as I mentioned, the forest is also a host of many recreational opportunities and resources, including a disc golf course, a model air flying field. It was the home of the heath hen until that bird was unfortunately exterminated, or is no longer with us, unfortunately. But we still celebrate its historical presence on the island. Tremendous amount of opportunity for hiking and biking throughout the state forest with this trails network, including the fire roads and hiking opportunities, biking, horseback riding, dog walking, which the forest receives a lot of use for these recreational opportunities. And then, of course, there's hunting that goes on within the forest. and people take advantage of those opportunities as well. And all of these activities that go on in the forest are carefully considered, reviewed, and go through a process internally and then regulatorily before they're allowed to occur in the forest because of its very special nature and its designation as a reserve. Next slide, please. So when we look at conducting projects on DCR properties anywhere, and any kind of project, not just limited to trail design and construction, there is an internal review process and a regulatory process that we have to follow. So the first thing that we consider is our designation, as I mentioned. So Manuel Correllus is a reserve. It has specific management guidelines that are aligned with being a reserve. And so we consult those and see what kind of uses are appropriate, what kind of management is appropriate for a reserve. Then we have resource management plans that we have developed for many of our properties and are developing for all of them in the next couple of years, actually, where we lay out short-term and long-term management goals. What's appropriate to happen in the forest or other properties, and what would be out of sync with our management goals and the habitat and ecosystem of that location. And then to avoid and minimize impacts to ecological resources, there are quite a few regulatory requirements. So we have to consider rare species and rare species habitat to comply with the Mass Endangered Species Act and coordinate closely with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. We, of course, have to comply with the wetlands and waterways regulations and the Wetlands Protection Act. So we coordinate with the Mass Department of Environmental Protection, local conservation commissions, in some cases, the Army Corps of Engineers. And then if there is enough of an impact and certain resources are used, we have to run the projects through the Mass Environmental Policy Act and make sure that we're in compliant with that. So there's a strict set of regulations that we must comply with. And then it's very important that we avoid and minimize impacts to cultural and archaeological resources. And so we coordinate very closely with the Mass Historic Commission to make sure that we protect those valuable resources of the Commonwealth as well. Next slide, please, Allie. When we're looking at specifically at trail design and trail creation, we are very much aware of the simple statement that every trail impacts wildlife and habitat. Even the most perfectly designed trail is going to have impacts on wildlife and habitat. So we start from that launching point. So then we consult our landscape designations. And as a reserve, I would point to look to the table in the lower right portion of the slide. You'll notice that for a reserve, we've determined that we would like to maintain our trail systems to be of low density in the property to help protect the wildlife and the recreational experience of these reserve systems. And then we, of course, have to look at the ecological resources. So new trails and ongoing trail maintenance, we have to coordinate again with the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program to make sure that we're minimizing to the greatest extent possible impacts to wildlife and rare species and rare habitats, and comply with the wetlands and waterways laws and regulations. So often, as I mentioned before, working with conservation commissions and DEP to make sure that the trail avoids having impacts to these resource areas that are vitally important. Then we also have to consider cultural and archaeological resources. And for that, for us, that means that is this new trail going to require disturbance of the earth? And if it is, we have to conduct a review for archaeological resources, cultural resources, historical resources, and make sure that the trail is respectful and to the extent that we can avoids having any negative impact on those valuable resources. And there are other things we have to consider as well in the design and construction of trails. Like in Manuel Correllus as a state forest land, there's a lot of forest management that goes on there and forest ecosystem management that goes on in the forest. And we want to make sure that we're not conflicting with the ability of our staff and others that we work with to conduct that work to control invasive species in the forest, control stands of trees that may be inappropriately located in the forest and that we're trying to return to native habitat. And we don't want the trail network to interfere with our ability to do that kind of work. And then we also look at, is there evidence for demand for these trails? Because we want to make sure that there is demand and that they will be used if we put them out. We want to look at the short-term and long-term management issues of how we're going to maintain these trails. Are we going to be able to keep them in good shape so that they're not encroaching and slowly expanding into the nearby ecosystem? And then any other potential conflicts that we can think of. So it's quite a detailed process that we go through to approve new trails on any of our properties, and particularly here in Manuel Correllus. Next slide, please. So thinking of that process, that background and that process, there are a number of trails that, as Priscilla mentioned, came to our attention that did not go through that appropriate process, and therefore we are considering them to be unauthorized trails. And we're going to talk about that. But we also looked at this as an opportunity to reassess the entire trails network. So the unauthorized trails and the trails that are approved, if you will, and exist right now. And then we are going to be turning to you for assistance and support for elements of the plan that we're going to present. So next slide, please. Just a little bit of a timeline on the unauthorized trails. So in mid-April of 2020, our trails program staff and Natural Heritage became aware of the unauthorized trail creation. And that immediately began our review process to find out what had happened and the extent of what had happened and what we needed to do. And in that review, it was determined that the Sheriff's Meadow Foundation was involved with the unauthorized trail creation. And so we brought Sheriff's Meadow into the conversations between DCR, Natural Heritage. So it was a three-way conversation that we began right away to try to address this issue. In May of 2020, Natural Heritage issued a non-compliance letter to the Sheriff's Meadow Foundation because the trails were unauthorized. In other words, they had not gone through that process that I just described for you. And so the foundation was out of compliance according to Natural Heritage and certainly according to our DCR as well. In July of 2020 through present, we've been working with Natural Heritage and Sheriff's Meadow, and we've been discussing restitution and developing a restoration plan that we will present to you. And in October and through the end of the year, we conducted several site visits to review the unauthorized trails and the authorized trails and really look at the entire network. And so in January, earlier this year, we conducted an assessment of the whole situation, the entire trail system, the unauthorized trails, our approved trails, and we're going to be presenting to you our plan tonight of how to resolve this situation. And I'm going to turn it over now to Ali Achandi, who's going to show you some of the maps that we've developed that kind of give you a nice visual depiction of what we're talking about. So Ali?
Good evening, everybody. The map that you're viewing right now on your screen is the official trails map for Manuel Correllus State Forest. So these are all of the official trails as of 2016. And these are the trail or trail layer that you can find on MassGIS if you prefer to obtain your trail data that way. As a result of the unauthorized trails, we ended up with an additional 25 miles of unauthorized trails in the park. And so we just wanted to show you a representation of what these trails look like when overlaid on our official trails map. So anything that is in orange and orange alone were the unauthorized trails that were created at the state forest.
Okay, next slide, please, Ali. Okay, so as I mentioned before, all trails, no matter how they're developed or where they're developed, they all have impacts on wildlife and habitat and wildlife values. Okay, so we are trying to minimize those impacts as to the extent that we can by running everything through our regulatory process and our internal reviews. So why are these trails, unauthorized trails, an issue? Well, they resulted, as Ali just mentioned, in 25 miles of unauthorized system, addition to the system, which turns out results in approximately 32 acres of disturbance to rare species habitat. So a red flag right at the get-go. It also, these trails result in other ecological impacts like habitat fragmentation and degradation of habitat. And, this is, excuse me, very important because this expanded system of trails causes additional stress to rare species and like rare birds that are nesting in the forest, the additional disturbance that they experience. So we take this very seriously, that this is fragments the forest in a way that we would not have preferred. And it conflicts with our trail density guidelines, as I described in general terms before. If you look at this table in the middle of the slide, the official approved map that Ali mentioned for Manuel Correllus list shows you 72 miles of trails. Now that includes the forest roads and fire breaks and that we have to maintain for public safety and fire access. And that mileage puts us in the medium density range already. So, and as I mentioned, we would prefer to keep our reserves, or we will keep our reserves in the lower to, just breaking into the medium range of density. If you look at the column on the right, with the addition of the 25 miles of trails, we are into the high density for the trail network. And it is really inappropriate for our reserve designation. And then, of course, these trails did not go through that entire regulatory and review process that I laid out for you. And so they are unauthorized trails. So as a result, our determination is that these trails, the unauthorized trails, will be closed, and we will be working to restore them. And we will have a monitoring protocol where we can ensure that this restoration will be successful. But again, I want to point out that this was also an opportunity for us to look at and amend the entire trails network, not just the unauthorized trails. So next slide, please, Ali. So, so this looking at the unauthorized trails made us take a second look at the existing trails network in Manuel Correllus. And we noticed that some of the approved or authorized trails that you can find on the map, when we looked at them, were redundant, probably poorly sited, and even unused. Some of the trails that we visited were actually starting to restore themselves because of just such little use. So we, again, looked at this whole network of what is happening here in the forest with these goals in mind, that we definitely want to maintain, to the extent possible, the existing density and the existing footprint of the trails system in the forest. But we also want to think about, are there opportunities here where we could improve the connectivity across the forest? And do this in such a way that we are protecting rare species and their habitat and all the ecological resources of the island. And the plan we're going to present to you, we feel, accomplishes these goals. So next slide, please, Alan. Okay, so excuse me. The plan we've developed by looking at, again, the unauthorized trails and the existing approved trails network. What we've decided on is that we are going to, we decided to add 4.3 miles of new trails. In other words, segments of the unauthorized trails that we think improve the connectivity that I mentioned across the state forest. Okay, but to offset that addition of that mileage, we are going to close and restore 3.1 miles of what is currently approved trails in the system. And that will permit us to do restoration of sensitive rare habitat and protection of the ecological resources of the forest. So we're ending up with a net gain of about 1.2 miles, which will slightly increase the overall mileage of the trail system in the forest, but it keeps us in that medium range where we are right now. And so to give you a visual representation of what this means, I'm going to turn it back over to Ali, who's going to show you some of the maps that we developed.
And I wanted to click on and off the unauthorized trail network once again. I did notice that someone had a question about not being able to see the colors. So this right now is the authorized trails as of 2016. And then the additional smaller trails that you see within the interior of the forest are the unauthorized 25 miles of trail. So again, going back to our 2016 map. And as Eric mentioned, after some careful desktop review and analysis in terms of potential recreational needs and connectivity between the western and eastern part of the forest, as well as an analysis on a desktop of habitat, a group of us, including ecology, operations, fire control, natural resources, went out and started doing some ground truthing and looking at some of the habitats where some of these unauthorized and some of the authorized trails go through, in order to determine whether or not our 2016 trails network makes sense also from a habitat perspective. And so from all of that analysis, we determined that certain DCR trails that were poorly sited, like Eric mentioned, or went through some significant habitat could be removed from the trail map and also restored to pre-existing conditions. The first trail that I'm going to be talking about is Red Path, which is this one right here, clicking off and on. So Red Path is a poorly sited trail. It's also pretty redundant when compared to the fact that you have the bike path about 15 feet away from Red Path. Red Path also crosses through the outer edges of a frost bottom or frost pocket, and we want to make sure that we're protecting some of the frost pockets because these are some of the most imperiled and fragile ecosystems that we have in the state forest. So we will be removing, enclosing, and restoring Red Path. The next trail that we look at is the purple trail that's flashing on and off. This is an unnamed trail on our forest map. And when we visited it, we noticed that it's getting very little use. I ended up walking through the entirety of the trail and noticed that this trail also goes through a frost pocket. Due to lack of use and at the fact that it goes through the middle of the frost pocket, we also will be closing and restoring this trail. So it will be coming off the map. Then we looked at some additional trails that were either redundant or interfered with some of our operations and management of the park, as well as restoration efforts to try to improve habitat, overall habitat within the forest. So starting with this trail that's flashing off and on, it's green. This is another unnamed trail. This is part of the administrative road that starts over here and used to continue this way. After review with operations, fire, and forest, we noticed that this road is really not used very often, and it does go through a shrub habitat that's currently maintained by fire control. So the trail also runs parallel to the paved bike path. It's about 25 feet away. So it's another trail that gives us an opportunity to restore some critical habitat, which is that scrub shrub community. Then we looked at Trail C. which is the one flashing up at the top. And I'll circle it over here. Again, this was a trail that used to be an administrative road, but then we also have another administrative road right within 10 feet of it. We actually separated into two crews, and each one of us walked one of the roads, and we could see each other the entire time. This path is not very highly used. It does have some pitch pine that will need to be managed in the future, but we're also proposing to close and restore this trail. We would take it off the map. And then finally, this Pahaganag-Omnade path goes right through the middle of some prime and beautiful scrub shrub habitat that's critical for our endangered species. And it's also right in the middle of some future forest and fire control management within the park. So we're also proposing to remove that particular trail. So in terms of trail removal, like the slide beforehand mentioned, we're looking at 3.13 miles of DCR authorized trail removal and restoration. Now, in order to provide for the connectivity along the park and some, balance with the recreational use as well, we are proposing to add sections of the previously named Fantasy and Twisty Trail. These are the names that were given when the trails were created. However, these trails have been edited or given a diet in order to avoid some other critical resources that we noticed that the trail actually went through. Portions of Fantasy and Tranquility also went through a frost pocket or really close to a frost pocket. So we're proposing to close and restore that section that used to be here, and adding or reauthorizing or authorizing, going through the entire process that Eric spoke of, adding sections of Fantasy and Tranquility to provide for that connection between the southwestern and northeastern part of the forest. And this also gives us an opportunity to really provide some stewardship and education about frost bottoms, because the trail does have an overlook where we could potentially include some signage and some interpretation to describe the importance of some of the frost pocket habitats within the forest. We're also proposing to add portions of the called Twisty Trail. And this will also provide an opportunity as a loop trail really close to the headquarters, with a lot of the recreational facilities are currently happening between parking, the disc golf course, and other trails. We also have some forest plantations nearby. And this trail gives us also an opportunity to talk to the public about different other ecosystems that are present within the forest. These include the scrub shrub community, the sandplain grassland habitat, some of your pitch pine, as well as white pine plantations, and talk about our efforts in managing Manuel Correllus for its critical habitat that it provides, as well as health and safety for the public and the community within Martha's Vineyard. So ultimately, this is what the trail network is going to look like within the forest. So this is the proposed amendment 2021 trail network.
Thank you, Allie. If you can go to the next slide, please. So how are we going to accomplish this? So our action plan is that we are, as I said, we're going to close and restore the unauthorized trails, all except for those segments that we are going to retain and add to our approved list. So we are going to accomplish this in partnership with Sheriff's Meadow. We are developing a memorandum of understanding with Sheriff's Meadow that will lay out exactly who's responsible for what, and supervision, and what actions are approved within the park, within the forest, excuse me. While this is happening, we are going to share an interim trail map, and we are hoping to have that ready. We will have it ready by next week. And it will be accessible through the internet. And while that's going on, we are developing signage to close the trails. And so this spring and through the summer, you will see signs going out to close the trails. And we will be taking other actions to close the heads and access points to these trails. We also are going to be concurrently filing that new plan that Allie just showed you with the Natural Heritage Program and all of the regulatory agencies, and basically start the process from start the clock at zero, as it should have been done, and is required for us to do, and run the new proposed trail network, the new planned trail network, through all regulatory requirements. And when we are issued a permit to proceed and have completed all the reviews, we will issue a final version of the new trail system map. Now, I should also mention that along with this restoration work that's going to be going on, there will be a significant amount of additional habitat enhancement that will include invasive species monitoring, location, and identification and mapping. We are going to be working with Sheriff's Meadow as part of their mitigation requirements to come back into compliance with natural heritage. And we are then going to begin to act on that plan and remove invasive species and conduct invasive species management work in the forest. And this is going to be a significant improvement or enhancement for the state forest. And then we're going to be conducting, DCR will be conducting additional habitat improvement, including some forest management to address potentially stands of plantation trees that we would like to restore to native habitat and return the ecosystem to its native species composition. So as you see on the right there, this is a draft version of the kind of sign that you're going to be seeing going up throughout the park. It's going to be an extensive sign operation to get these signs out there. We're looking at putting a lot of signs out there to get the message out that these trails are going to be closed and restored. Next slide, please, Ellie. And then in addition to this immediate action, or action going through the spring and summer, we are looking at this as an opportunity to enhance the stewardship of the state forest overall. And I'm sure many of you are aware that we've had a vacancy in the forest supervisor position for quite a while. That is no longer true at this point. We are very happy to have Connor Laffey join or come on board in this role as the forest supervisor. Connor has several years of experience with DCR, most recently at Wacoit Bay. He's a natural resources background and expertise and restoration work and forestry work. And we're really excited to have Connor in position now, and will be a vital link for everything that's happening in the forest. And additionally to that, we are going to establish partnerships and develop these memorandums of understanding with any stakeholder groups. So we're looking at this as an opportunity that any activity that's going to be going on in the state forest that involves a partnership with an outside entity, this is an opportunity for us to enhance our oversight and guidance of those activities, and really kind of formalize agreements with people so that everybody understands exactly who they should be reporting to, what supervision is required, and what needs to happen, who they need to contact. So just lay things out much more clearly moving forward. And then we see this as a real opportunity to get the message out about how special this place really is. So we are working now on language and developing interpretive signs that you will see being placed in the forest to point out the frost pockets and the fire-dependent ecosystems that exist in the forest, and really highlight how special Manuel Correllus is. And then beyond that, look at other opportunities for interpretive programs and new ways to interpret just how unique Manuel Correllus is, and get the word out and really use this as an opportunity to educate people on a much broader scale of this precious place. Next slide, please. But to do this, of course, we're going to need your help because this is your forest. We are the stewards that you've hired to do this job. So this is your forest. So we want to hear from you. What kind of interpretive efforts are you interested in seeing in the forest? What could we highlight? How could we make that happen? We're also going to ask you to help us promote the interim trails plan and disseminate it and get it out to everybody. And then once we issue it, disseminate the final trails plan once we have that released. And then, of course, we're asking everybody to respect the trail closures so that we can heal these trails, let them heal, let them restore, and we'll have a successful restoration effort. And of course, we're looking to the public to continue to be interested. It's fantastic that you're all here tonight. That shows that you're very passionate about the state forest. That's very much appreciated. And, you know, consider becoming a forest volunteer, a forest steward, and helping us and participating with us to manage this beautiful state forest. And with that, we're going to open it up for questions.
Thanks, Eric. So thanks everyone for joining this evening. I also wanted to thank Representative Fernandez's office. They sent a staffer, Kaylia Moore. Thank you for joining. If there are any other legislators who are on the call or any staffers, please shoot me a message on the chat and we can have you speak. So we're going to be moving to the Q&A portion of tonight's meeting. There's been a number of questions sent in the written in the Q&A. So we're going to start there. So I'm going to send it over to Jenny, but please raise your hands and later we will unmute people and people can speak questions as well as type questions in the Q&A portion at the bottom. So Jenny, if you'd like to.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. So the first question is from David Foster. He says, thanks very much for this presentation, for the openness of DCR and the Commonwealth regarding this issue. This is a very welcome discussion. Everything that you have said about the importance of Manuel Correllus to the island, the state and the globe is absolutely true. It is a unique resource. My question is, given this importance, why does and has the Commonwealth allocated a single individual to the task of overseeing and managing this invaluable resource? We, and I speak here for the island, I live in West Tisbury, and a much larger community of people across the region care immensely and are willing to help in many ways, but leadership needs to come from the Commonwealth. My guess is that if oversight was present, we would not have experienced these unauthorized impacts.
I'm wondering, Priscilla, is that maybe?
Yep. I was just trying to unmute. So I would just say, so David, thank you very much for that question. And I would say that we're very happy to have Connor there. Connor is not alone in that there are, we have our regional leadership and they're actually on the call tonight. Susan Kane, our regional director, Steve Duty, our assistant regional director. Actually, Karen Lothrop is on the call as well, who is our forest firefighter too, who has worked out there as well. And I think that, you know, as Eric said too, you know, and we say in our mission statement, all of these resources belong to all of us, but we can't do it alone. And so we really need to have that shared stewardship. So while we may want to have, you know, more individuals physically present all the time there at the forest, I want to assure you that we do have support in other positions. And we're also looking at this as an opportunity to really foster some partnerships as well. And that's what Eric had said at the end, that we're looking to, there are a number of groups and organizations who always want to help with the forest, and we welcome that. And we just want to make sure that we manage everybody's expectations. So we know that everybody is going to be in compliance with our rules and procedures, and that we know what the group's expectations are. So that's really what we're looking for here today. You have to start somewhere. So we're absolutely thrilled that we have that position filled with Connor. And I know Jane is in this meeting as well. And so Jane, thank you very much for joining us. So, Connor will continue that legacy of forest supervisor out there. But again, we're really looking for everybody to be a steward. So we welcome that.
Thank you, Priscilla. The next question from Richard DeWitt. The fire lanes should not be counted as trails. Why are they counted? Many of them are unrideable as the surface is too sandy.
Well, I think that we consider them trails for multiple purposes. So, we consider this trails network to be open to bike riding, but also hiking, and it just, walking through the forest. So, to a certain extent, the sandiness of the trails and the condition of the fire trails, they are maintained specifically as primarily and foremost as access for fire lanes and fire breaks and accessing for our fire crews. So it may not be the perfect or the most desirable biking experience, but we have this other mix of uses that they do offer, and I think that's just the reality of the situation.
Okay, thank you, Eric. From Jane Varkonda, are any of the trails that you propose to not maintain or restore ancient ways?
That's a good question. I'd actually like to, we will, thank you for raising that, because we will look at that.
Okay, great. Next from John Honeycutt. Thanks for the information. To be clear, are the only trails being closed the ones highlighted during the presentation? And yeah, that's it. Sorry.
Yeah. So the trails that are being closed are, the vast majority of the unauthorized trails. So if you recall the map that Ali showed of the sort of squiggly orange lines, the vast majority of those are going to be closed. Thank you, Ali. Yes, here we go. So this is the network of trails that is mostly going to be closed. Now we did, as Ali pointed out, we kept segments of a couple of these trails. Again, thank you, Ali. And we are also looking to close some of our trails that exist as approved trails right now, because we think they are inappropriately cited. And that's when Ali was walking through the map and flashing the segments off and on. So it's both trails that were created in an unauthorized fashion, and trails that have existed for a while in the forest. Segments of those will be closed.
Okay, next question. Thank you. They're actually related questions from Melanie Nardone and Richard DeWitt. We also need to address littering and garbage, and who is responsible for clearing debris on the paved shared paths?
Absolutely. And as Priscilla mentioned, we can't do this alone. And, it is certainly our responsibility to the best of our abilities and the staff that we have available to make sure that we're collecting trash and maintaining keeping the park clean in that manner. But again, we're hoping that highlighting the beauty and uniqueness of this park and looking to the public to get involved as stewards will help us reduce some of that activity in the state forest.
And I also want to I'm sorry, yes, Susan, please.
My name is Susan Kane, and I'm the South Regional Director, and I'm still fairly new in my position along with Connor. And I would just add that we do have 2 seasonal positions as well that have been added to our roster, and we increased the grade of one of them to be a supervisor. So we're really hopeful that we can fill those 2 seasonal positions with, people who reside on Martha's Vineyard. And, in addition to the staff that we would have on the island and the Fire Bureau, there is also a whole support network back on the mainland to support Connor. So, although he is alone out there right now, we do have many parts of the agency, and it's my commitment to support him in a much bigger way than maybe there was support. This position was supported in the past. So I just wanted to reassure you with that.
Thanks, Susan. Dan, you want to go to, I think there's one hand up.
Yep, we have a hand up. That's Stephen Park. So Stephen, I'm going to allow you to talk now, and then ask you to unmute. Stephen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi. Yeah, I had a couple questions. I'm familiar with the trails in the park, and I'm actively involved in trail efforts elsewhere as well. One of the questions I had was that many of the trails in the park, the legacy trails, appear unused because they're not actively maintained and have grown unpassable. And so I think that part of the problem is that these other new trails have been sought because, quite frankly, people are looking for a way to get in and around the park in a way that's feasible. Is DCR committing to maintaining the legacy trails such that there will be a resource that people can use?
Yes, definitely. As I mentioned in the presentation, that is certainly one of the considerations that we look at is, long term, are we able to maintain these trails? And that's a consideration in our review process. But yes, absolutely, we need to maintain the trails.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
I see on the map that there's a disproportionately high density of trails near the forest headquarters, and pretty much everywhere else in the park there's a much lower density of trails. Why is it that in the consideration of redundant trails that's those trails near the forest headquarters are allowed to be so dense, while there are some parts of the park that are more or less inaccessible completely? Could you speak to that redundancy and the sort of disproportionate densities among the around the park?
Well, sure. I hope this satisfies you, but let me know. So again, we looked at this as an opportunity to improve the connectivity across the park, and in that upper northeast section that you're talking about near the headquarters, there is a lot of density also of yes, thank you, Allie, of fire roads, fire breaks, and so it is more dense. But we feel that this network, as I mentioned, increases connectivity across the entire forest. And the other thing is that we were looking at a lot of our trails presently were not specifically designed as single track bike trails. So we wanted to see if there was an opportunity to retain some of these trails that offer that experience. And so a lot of these trails that you would go out and hike on and bike on, it's a different experience when you are navigating, say, a very twisty trail that you see in red there on the north east portion of that trail, because it's specifically designed as a single track bike path, which is a different use. So, we were trying to balance that, and then of course, it's all in the framework of the trail network that was created. There was really no way for us to approve that trail network. Just regulatorily, we could not do it because of its extensive nature and the extensive impacts that it had in this forest. So, we're hoping that this strikes sort of a measured a mean that satisfies people to the extent that we can. But again, as I hope came across, there are a lot of regulatory and review and policy constraints that keep us from, doing much more than we've proposed here.
Okay, I'm going to go back to reading some. Thank you, Eric. We've got from Cindy Trish a couple of questions. Well, I realize this is about restoration. I would like very much to hear how this situation developed and why we should not be concerned about something like this happening in the future. What is being done to address these crimes against nature? Cindy, I hope that the addition of Connor and the addition of some seasonals and mainland staff support, it has increased. I hope Susan was able to answer that question. So your next question, going forward, if and when we have questions and concerns, what are the channels of communication? I think I can answer that. It's going to be Connor, right? As the main point of contact. Connor, again, has a whole support network, and you can always send questions to mass.parks@mass.gov, and you can always reach out to me. My name is jennifer.norwood@mass.gov. What impact do these developed trails have on the fire danger for the island?
Well, I think one thing, and others can please chime in, is that when we were actually out there walking the trails, we had two of our fire staff with us, including the regional fire warden. And one of his concerns was that a trails network running through their fire, unauthorized trail network running through their fire break network and the established fire network, it can be problematic because they don't know when people are using those trails. It's not an authorized system that's been coordinated with the overall fire management program in the park. So, that's yet another concern we had. And I briefly mentioned that when the conflict in our forestry operations, I would say forest and fire operations, is, that this trail network presents a conflict with the fire network that we maintain in the state forest. If somebody else has additional information, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Josh is in the audience, and he may have additional information. He is our from Forest Fire Control.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the closures won't impact any fire and danger. It's going to give us still enough access to reach any area of the forest to be able to respond to any sort of fire. The only thing I did want to add is DCR Forest Fire Control does have a permanent year-round position assigned to the island, and that's Karen Lothrop. And part of her job is to assist the park superintendent with anything that he might need help with. And the other thing is DCR Forest Fire Control will also be getting an additional seasonal there over this next season too.
Great. Okay, and then finally from Cindy, how do we assess the short and long-term impact of trails being created? The trails, the illegal trails.
Well, so the short and long term. Well, we know that there were definitely immediate impacts because of the 32 acres of impact to the rare species habitat. And as I pointed out, 90% of this forest is rare species habitat. So there were definitely impacts. Long term, as I said, we're beginning a restoration process. So we are going to be implementing a 5-year monitoring program with periodic monitoring of what's occurring in the restoration process and annual reports, and we'll be visiting the island annually. So we will be monitoring that very question long term: is this ecosystem restoring itself, and how better can we help it reach that end? So What specific long-term impacts, I don't think we know at this point.
Okay, next question from Henry Nieder. Is the present density of the fire roads necessary? That is, are all required? They interfere with the habitat more than the trails.
Maybe Josh, could you take another crack at that? I don't want to speak for you.
Yes, as far as the width and length of the fire roads, they are where we needed them to be. If you were to look at Google Earth about 30 years ago, you wouldn't even be able to see them like you can today. They were that overgrown. We've taken a lot of effort and time to be able to get them where they are today, to be able to slow a fire down, and for our partners and fire agencies to be able to get in there and make a difference to put those fires out.
Okay, thank you. Next question is actually on invasives. Will there be any selected harvesting of planted pines, especially white pines, like was done in the late 70s? And then related from David Foster, white pines and spruce of all kinds are non-native species to the island and Manuel Correllus. Will these be a focus of either the invasive species management and removal or the plantation management and removal?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, yes, we are looking at the plantations and the white pine and the spruce as opportunities for that mitigation that I mentioned. So to get these additional miles of those segments of trails that we're proposing to retain, to get those approved, we are required as DCR to propose mitigation. And yes, absolutely, we're looking at the opportunity to address plantations and other incursions of species that are not part of the native habitat as an opportunity to meet that mitigation requirement.
Thank you. Next from Noah Asamow from the Vineyard Gazette. How much is the restoration plan going to cost? Is there a budget?
Well, the bulk of the cost is actually going to be borne by the Sheriff's Meadow Foundation as part of their non-compliance with the Natural Heritage Program. So the work that we would be doing to remove those segments of approved trails that we highlighted, we have planned for a Student Conservation Association crew to come out this summer and work with our staff to address those trails. We had planned to bring that crew out anyway to do trails work. So, there will be staff time costs as there is for every day that we manage this state forest. But again, the bulk of the restoration cost is going to be borne by Sheriff's Meadow Foundation.
Okay, thank you. From Graham Smith, I saw the path signs were understandably removed from specifically the corner of Fantasy and Tranquility. Will those be replaced now that they're going to be made official? My concern is safety and that a lot of the forest looks similar and it's easy for people to get lost.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we noticed that when we were out walking the trails, that we need additional signage to direct people safely through the forest. So yes, we will be looking at that as an opportunity to do that as well.
Okay, next, please. People use the fire lanes as okay. That's a statement. Let me get to a question. There's an incredible amount of dead wood in the forest causing a danger to the forest and our citizens. What do you do about this?
Certainly, this is one of the forest management actions that I mentioned that happens within the forest when I was speaking about conflicts with the trail network. But I think I'd be more comfortable with, again, reaching out to Josh if you'd mind talking about that from a fire perspective.
DCR has been very committed to dealing with the issues of dying plots of woods within the state forest. We've been actively managing that and keeping track of where things are. And as things break and fall, we're right out there getting rid of it and making it safe for the public.
Okay, thank you. From Christopher Neal, I want to commend DCR on the plan that closes the unauthorized trails, recognizes the unique biological value, and pledges to commit to energy and resource to more habitat management in the future. Thank you. From Anton Lima, what constitutes trail closure and restoration? Will there be hard closing in addition to signs? Will vegetation be replaced or just left to grow back? Signs will not be enough to discourage use of the unauthorized trails.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yes, part of our plan, our plan is to use all of those tools. So we will be posting signs at the intersections of approved trails and unauthorized trails. We will be brushing in trailheads to discourage people from using those trails. And where necessary, we will be doing active restoration of the trails. In other words, replanting, restoring some of the soil profile, that kind of thing. But we also hope to be able to take advantage of the forest's ability to restore itself to the extent that we can. There are a lot of trails where nature will grow back if it's permitted, if nature's permitted to do so. That's our hope.
Thanks, Eric. From Richard O'Toole, during the drought-less summer, there was a lot of concern about wildfire. How will you address this? Some of the fire lanes have been allowed to grow in.
I'm going to turn it to Josh again because I don't want to step on his toes.
The fire lanes, as far as fire danger, the trail closings and it's not going to affect any of that. We are still in very good shape with our active management and keep our mowing of our fire lanes. Karen has been doing a phenomenal job of keeping up our yearly mows and keeping those fuels in the fire lanes down. And the other thing, now that COVID's going to be down a little bit, we are hopefully going to get back into our prescribed burn program, and we'll be treating some of the areas of the state forest this year with fire again.
Great. Okay, from Bill Vino, thank you for taking a comprehensive look at all the trails. To what extent have you bounced off the Martha's Vineyard community or intended closures of authorized trails and selected retention of unauthorized trails? Some of the former are old cart paths or ancient ways, and I think more consideration might be given to the links some of the trails provided to external access to the forest. My recommendation would be to have an input session for such comments before finalizing the reconfigured trails. Thank you, Bill. Actually, following this presentation, we will be posting this presentation and a recording for comment. So any comments you have about that would be great, including wanting to do an input session. So please participate in that once the presentation is done. Let me look. Will DCR improve signage throughout the park to make it clear which activities are permitted and which are not? Specifically, is e-biking permitted or not? We've had a couple of questions about e-biking.
Actually, I don't know that.
They're not permitted right now.
Okay.
Under our regulations. They're not permitted.
Okay, but we are going to, part of the plan is to add interpretive signage, and part of interpretive signage too is letting folks know what is permitted and what is not. Okay.
Right. So Jenny, in terms of signage, I think there'll be interpretive signage, there'll be the closure signage, and then there'll also be that wayfinding that we talked about a little bit before to make it
Right.
easier. Yep.
Okay. Okay. We mentioned the trails being unauthorized. Is it true that the prior manager approved the trails?
We have no documentation to that effect. Really no way to know factually one way or the other.
Okay. Again, why no e-bikes and what is our policy on e-bikes? I guess why no e-bikes?
So it's just our regulations. It's DCR regulations in general don't allow the e-bikes there.
Okay. I think that's it. Okay, wait. The plan appears to remove all access trails into the portion of the forest south of West Tisbury Road. Is the intent that this large section of forest be not accessible?
Yeah, so that's the Pahogannett section, I believe. No, there will be, there are some trails that we're retaining there, approved trails. And so, but if you go to that section right now, there is quite remarkable redundancy of trails in the network. And so we feel that the bulk of the trails down there really should be closed.
Okay, great. I'm going to jump to Dan now. Dan, do you want to take some of the hand raises?
Definitely. So we have Noah. So Noah, I'm going to allow you to talk and ask on mute.
Hi, this is Noah Asma with the Vineyard Gazette. I was wondering if there would be any, or if you guys knew if there were any criminal or civil penalties that would be assessed against either Sheriff's Meadow or any of the individuals who were involved in the unpermitted trail clearing. I believe that violations of the endangered species and natural heritage can be subject to those.
Jesse, I wonder if you would be best to take that one.
Under the MISA regulations, violations of MISA are a possibility, but at this time, we're not envisioning penalties being a part of the return to compliance plan at this time.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Sure.
What's involved in that decision-making process? And I guess who is involved in it as well? How does that happen?
Well, I can certainly point you to the regulations themselves to give you a little bit more information on that. A big part of that is based on the return to compliance plan and ensuring that the violation is addressed quickly and effectively. And that's a decision-making process that involves the regulatory review staff at DFW in consultation with the Assistant Director of Natural Heritage. It's handled on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noah. Thanks, Jesse. We're going to move on to the next participant's question. So that's Jane. Jane, I'm going to allow you to talk and ask you to unmute.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm here. I'm just asking what has DCR implemented to see what you guys can do to make sure this doesn't happen again. And also, who is going to be monitoring the trails to make sure it's in compliance? And I think that was my last question.
Thanks for the question, Jane. So the last portion, as I mentioned, we're going to be restoring the trails and implementing a 5-year monitoring program. We are going to be working with Sheriff's Meadow, who will, throughout the year be doing the monitoring and reporting back to us on a periodic basis. Of course, they have to coordinate everything with our staff. We will be conducting annual visits to review the monitoring outcomes and reviewing an annual report, which will report on the status of the restoration work. As to how we prevent this from happening again, I think I think we've kind of addressed that in that we're really focusing our efforts on supporting Connor. First of all, having Connor out there is a huge plus, and supporting him with the mainland staff, supporting him with all the other networks of folks, including Natural Resources that I'm director of, and then using the forest as we presented as an opportunity to engage the public more fully and really make people appreciate the specialness of this place, and in hopes that they become stewards and in effect our eyes and ears throughout the forest.
Thank you, Eric. That is very helpful. What have you guys learned about third-party management here? DCR has, in my humble opinion, not been doing what they need to do there for the state forest, and you were relying on third-party management. What have you guys learned about it, and what are you thinking about it for the future?
Well, I'll answer, and then maybe Priscilla can give a sort of a higher level. But one of the things we pointed out, and we're very much committed to, is as I mentioned in the presentation, really formalizing partnerships with the people that are proposing projects or activities in the state forest. And I think we realize that it's really important to formalize those agreements and lay out clear expectations and clear plans of what everybody should be doing and who's responsible for what. So I think that's a learning point from this experience. And Priscilla, if you have anything else, that would be.
I would just echo that. And I would also say that, we need to make sure that when we put people in positions in DCR in new roles, such as Connor, and any, supervisor in a new position, that we provide them with the tools and the support that they need to be able to do their jobs. And you heard Susan Kane, who's our new regional director down in the South, who has pledged support for Connor and really all of her staff down there in the South, really hands-on, and also Assistant Regional Stephen Duty. But it's important for all aspects of the agency, all the disciplines within, to provide the tools that we need to people out in the field. And so Eric, as Director of Natural Resources, where he has, the ecology, inland and coastal ecology program, and we have our cultural resources program, certainly forest fire control is out there. All of those disciplines have to come together to provide that support. And sometimes we don't do the best job of educating people in those new positions about some of the rules and procedures that we have within DCR. And so this has really been an opportunity, as Eric said, for us to really take a step back and to not only analyze the trail system that we have there, but also the process that we have. And so those agreements with third parties to kind of manage expectations is absolutely critical, and it needs to be balanced with staffing and the tools for people to make, educated and informed decisions and to be able to do that with confidence.
Thanks, Priscilla, and thanks, Eric and Jane. So I just wanted to remind everyone that we will be going until 7:30 tonight, and we have a couple more hands raised and a few more written questions. So I'm just going to go to OL Hopkins now. So I'm going to allow you to talk and ask you to unmute.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. It's Yoel Hopkins, and I'm the chair of the Oak Bluffs Planning Board. I wanted to draw the DCR officials' attention to the northeast corner of the forest at the closest point to Edgartown Vineyard Haven Road, where I saw that you are enhancing some of the trails. We had a presentation from Sheriff's Meadow at a select board meeting about the possibility of authorized entry and exit of the forest at that point. When you walk the trails, was that discussed? Is that something that's been brought to your attention prior, or am I giving you new information?
No, we actually, yeah, that's a good point. We did notice when we walked that trail network that there were points where people were making their own entry points to the state forest. And so we are looking at those opportunities to address those situations as well. And also, does it make sense that some of those access points might meet our requirements as well? So it's a very good point, and we did notice those situations. So, but thank you for raising it.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we're going to go to John Patrick now. So I'm going to allow you to talk and ask you to unmute. John, are you there? Okay, we're gonna go to Dorothy then. Oh no, John unmuted. John, are you there?
I am here, but I don't actually have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for participating tonight. So we'll go to Dorothy then. Dorothy, I allow you to talk and ask you to unmute.
Okay, my name is Dorothy Zug, and I worked for DEM before it was DCR for 17 years. And when I came down to the vineyard last year to see if I would, for 4 months, to like to live here, I talked with the park supervisor. And I heard a sad story that he didn't have enough equipment to do the proper work, that he had only one seasonal helper, that he had to pay for his own way to go to regional meetings, and that they would not allow him to live in the house. He lived in the room he and his wife lived in a room of a friend of his. And it was a pathetic story. And I'm hopeful that, I'm so pleased that you understand how important the forest is to the vineyard. And I'm hopeful that some of these things will be corrected. I understand there'll be 2 seasonal helpers. It would be wonderful if there could be a second year-round helper. It's very hard to work alone. And then the housing on the vineyard, average modest homes run around 750,000. And with with the building where the headquarters are appropriate for a house where John Burkonda, an earlier supervisor, lived with his family, it seems a wise thing to allow the park supervisor to live there.
Thanks, Dorothy, for your comment. And so we are really excited for Connor to be joining us. And I know that having a supervisor live on site was something that we were looking into and discussing. But we want to thank you for your comment, and it's been heard. And
and I did write to the commissioner about it at a while back. I was so concerned.
We really appreciate your concern, Dorothy. And again, we're really excited that Connor's joining us now. And we've heard your comments, and I'm gonna move on to the next hand raised. We appreciate your participation tonight, Dorothy, and we're looking for Bill. Is Bill here?
I am. Yes, I just wanted to, it sounds like there might be some confusion in terms of the unauthorized trails. Those all haven't been a result of the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. They've been going on at least since maybe 2 decades ago, when the forest really widened the fire breaks, especially along the northern tier. You referenced some of the administrative roads and stuff. Those were all fire breaks, and then over time people used them to put trails in. And that may continue to be a hard thing to keep trail users off of the fire breaks in the future. But I just didn't want people to go away with the impression that all of these unauthorized trails have happened in just the past half dozen years.
Well, thank you for that comment. And I think certainly it's our hope that once we, that the final trail system that we designate and approve, is really the solution to that problem, no matter how long it's been going on. But thank you for your comment.
I also wanted to add, Bill, we did notice that individuals were using some of the soft breaks in the forest. And so one of our goals and efforts with the stewardship and signage in the park is to really educate the public as to why those soft breaks and other fire breaks are present and why they're critical for the environment, not only from a safety perspective, but also from an ecological perspective, and asking people to stay off of them and to really just focus on hiking and walking on the authorized trails.
I think that interpretive signage will be a great asset to the facility.
Thanks, Bill. So we're looking for Peter Wooden. I'm going to allow you to talk and unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Great. Well, I really appreciate the effort and work that's been done. And as always, a balance has to be struck between protection and preservation and the ability of the public to enjoy what's being protected and preserved. To that end, it looked on the map of what the trail system will look like as reconfigured, that much of the western quadrant has really no trails other than the fire roads and the paved perimeter road on the edge of the forest. And quite frankly, I'm not sure how much that will encourage the public to make use of what's appropriate, since I think not many people will find it a walk on a fire road as being the equivalent of a walk on a trail, and that looks like will be the only way to navigate the western quadrant.
Thank you for that comment, Peter. Yeah, there is definitely, you can see it on the map. There's less density in the western quadrant, and again, I think what we were dealing with and what we're looking at is, what can we really do here without tipping that balance that you mentioned, because of all the environmental, ecological assets and values of this state forest, and the associated regulatory constraints to protect those assets. So, as I said at the end of the presentation, I think our feeling is that there's really not a lot more that we could do and stay within our mission for this forest and the regulations that oversee what we can do.
Thank you for the response. I would just urge consideration of at least one trail that is a forest trail rather than a fire road in the western quadrant would be much appreciated by all of the folks who access the forest from the western quadrant.
Thank you for that comment. As much we've heard it and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go. I've got 7 more questions. We'll run a little bit over time to answer those questions. From Tim Boland, the Polly Hill Arboretum has been conducting floristic studies over the past 16 years. About 2 years ago, we were informed that our studies would not be allowed to continue and that, the state forest had been studied enough. This is not true, never will be, and many researchers would like to resume studies and would once again work to monitor rare plants, discover new populations, and also report new invasive species.
Well, thank you for that comment. And, I can't speak to the history of what communication you may have received, but we do manage an active research permitting program. So please reach out to me, eric.seaborn@mass.gov, and we can talk about it. But I can't think off the top of my head any reason why we wouldn't want to entertain additional ideas to do research in the state forest through our research permitting program.
Okay, next from Jeffrey Cassis, please review the timeline for the proposed new trail network and are resources fully committed in 2021? What are the risk factors associated with the execution of this proposal?
Okay. Ali, are you able to bring up that timeline again? To go back to the, oh, I think it's past that next one. No, where's, here we go. Okay, so our plan, what are the risk factors? Well, we have been fortunately all along in negotiations with Sheriff's Meadow Foundation. And I would like to take this opportunity to point out that they've been entirely open to what we've proposed and very much interested in coming back into compliance and supporting our efforts here. So they've been really cooperative and really interested in helping us out. So, you know, they have folks who are ready to help us out this spring to get out and install the signs to close the trails, help us begin to brush in trails and do some of the other restoration work. All of that is going to be started once we've signed this memorandum of understanding with Sheriff's Meadow. As I mentioned, we are also bringing an SCA crew on for this year to help us with our end of the restoration of these trails. And we are in the process of now working with Jesse at Wildlife to move through the regulatory process as soon as possible. So we're not anticipating any serious roadblocks or impediments that would keep us from doing this work at this time. So we feel this is, because of the lead time we've had, that this is an accomplishable plan this year.
Okay, I've got two of the same questions from Christopher Neal and Michael Whitmore. I'll read Michael's. Long-term monitoring is an important component of the restoration plan to ensure that the forest is recovered. Shouldn't an independent outside organization or company be given the responsibility to implement the 5-year monitoring plan?
I think we feel confident that we have the capacity to do that. And I would point out that, we are working closely with the Natural Heritage Program as our regulator. So it's not just DCR that is involved here in making sure that this is a successful restoration effort. Jesse's a really nice guy, but he can, if necessary, bring DCR into compliance as well. So we have very much an interest, in our in complying with the restoration effort here, primarily because we want to do it. It's the right thing to do, and this is why we're all in this business, is to take care of the earth. But there is that regulatory component of it that affects us as well.
Okay, and next question from Christopher Neal. Has there been any discussion of creating a campground at Manuel Correllus? And if there is, has that impact been taken into account in the overall trail plan?
Somebody else able to deal with that? I don't know anything about a campground proposal.
I think that under a former commissioner, there had been some kind of discussion about whether that could be a possibility, but I am unaware of anything that has been talked about recently. And if we did, it would have to go through the same process. So.
Okay, that's all I have. Are there any more hands raised, Dan?
There are no more hands raised. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining us this evening. If we could go to, so yeah, the recording is going to be at mass.gov/DCR/past-public-meetings. And if you have any suggestions for ongoing stewardship efforts, including interpretive signs and programs, You can subscribe emailing to mass.parks@mass.gov. And with that, I'm going to end the meeting and thank everyone for joining us tonight. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.